10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Cześć. Hello, this is Jason. Today I want to do an example of panning across a still image rather than just using it full frame or cropping it down and using it statically. I want to put some movement to it. If you're using Final Cut Pro, you're familiar with the Ken Burns effect. I've already copied my image over. It's stored in the RAM disk right now. I'm going to load ImageFX. ImageFX Studio is a powerful image processing program. ImageFX has been the Photoshop for Amiga for a long time, and it has many of the same options that you would find in Photoshop. You can work in layers. You can do all sorts of different effects. It can be used for animations, video sequences. ImageFX Studio is still available for purchase. I think it's about $30. It's well worth the purchase. It does have some components that are PowerPC accelerated if you have a PowerPC processor. For panning across this image using sort of the Ken Burns effect, I'm going to use a program called PanCanvas. PanCanvas 2 actually. It's an AREX plugin for ImageFX. It was available through Legacy Maker when I purchased it a long time ago. After I select the PanCanvas 2 plugin, it's asking me for the image that I want to use. I'm going to show you something that causes a problem with PanCanvas. In case you counter it, it's not a surprise. It was quite frustrating for me until I figured out what was causing this. We'll just go ahead and make my mistakes again, document them, and you can avoid them in the future. In the toolbox at the lower part of the screen, the main toolbox, on the right hand side you can see the progress bar of the image loading. The image is about 4,000 by 3,000 some pixels. I took it with my iPhone. It's not the newest iPhone, so I don't know what the resolutions are for newer phones. But this one's much higher than what I need for my MovieShop project. Once the image is loaded into the ImageFX buffer, you're presented with a Set Options window. These settings that you see in here are from the last time I used PanCanvas 2. The important part for MovieShop is the resolution, the frame size. I want this to match my NTSC resolution of 640 by 480. I'm going to make this animation 170 frames long. My render method is going to be in frames. I could apply some effects via these two process macro boxes. You could add something like motion blur, for example, but that will just add to the render time. And I'm doing a slow pan, so I really don't need the motion blur. The save path, make sure that your directory actually exists. Since it's in my RAM disk, I at one point forgot to recreate the directory and it gave me an error, but that's not the error that I want to show you today. I'll just quickly click OK. It's going to copy the data into a secondary buffer, and then you get this error 47, arithmetic conversion error at line 6. What the heck does that mean? I don't know. But I did find out what causes it. And let me close this stuff out. There you can see the full image that we'll be working with eventually. Let's go back to the beginning. I clicked on the AREX button. I'm in the Rex folder where my PanCanvas 2 lives. Hit OK. When I selected my image, let's go to volumes. This is where I was having the problem. I was clicking on RAM disk, that's where my image is saved. I clicked on my image, I hit OK, and then bam, error 47, error 47. Each time I tried it, no matter what I was doing. And here's the problem. When I clicked on my volume RAM disk, there is a space here between RAM and disk. PanCanvas does not like spaces in anything. So let's get rid of that. We're just going to refer to this drive as RAM:. You could rename your volume if you were on another volume that used spaces, or you can create an alias. So no more space in my volume name. It's going through the loading process again because I cleared out what we did before. Once this is loaded up, the window that you see the image in is going to be scaled down so you can see the whole image. But you could zoom in and out if you want. It's much larger than my screen display resolution. All right. Here we are again at the set options. I'm going to use all the same stuff that I had before. Just look at your save path, make sure there are no spaces. Look at your file name, make sure there's no spaces. I'm going to be saving as JPEG. I'm going to use a 4-digit numerical appendage. So that's going to be my numerical sequence that MovieShop is going to want to look for when I do an import on there. I am setting my JPEG compression to 70 to match what I'm using in MovieShop. And I'm going to hit OK. It's just doing some prep stuff. Here's my image. And what you'll see added to this are 2 boxes that define the start and end points. I can do a linear movement. I can do a linear movement with a zoom out. If I'm started zoomed in on this B, I could zoom out as I transition across this. I don't want to do all of this. I'm just showing you a few of the features. I can turn on spline and make various curved paths for the camera to follow. I don't want spline. I just want a linear path. Let's move this over a little bit. If I grab the corner of my start box, I can scale it up. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I can do the same with my end box. Just grab the lower right corner, make it the same size. As you're doing the sizing, if you look at the top, there's a little display. Currently says PanCanvas sizing. It gives you the resolution of your box. This is 1172 by 882. That's the same thing I have for both. I want to do an ease in out on this. You can make a custom ease in out. You can load a preset. Ease in, fast out, fast in, ease out. I'm going to use the Bohush ease, which is kind of a slow start. Then it goes through my pan, and then at the end there's a slow finish. Click OK on that. Now I want to create my pan. OK to begin rendering. This gives you some information about your setup. My boxes, my start and end boxes are 1172 by 882, but remember that's going to be scaled down to 640 by 480. If I click on preview, it's going to draw just a sort of a box across the screen along this path, so you can sort of see what it's going to look like. It's not going to actually render anything. I'm just going to click on OK to initiate the rendering. And you can see that box with the negative image in it. That's the area that it's currently working on. In the main ImageFX toolbox at the bottom, you can see some of this progress occurring as it's processing, scaling, saving the images. At the top of the screen, it says PanCanvas saving. It's working currently on frame 3. Then it's time to get some cover. If you want to get a more detailed introduction to PanCanvas 2 for ImageFX, go to AmigaVideo.net, no spaces. This is a video preservation website for Amiga. There are a lot of different tutorial videos that were put out years ago. There were a series of 3 videos called Catalyzer that deal with different aspects of ImageFX. If you want to get a little more in-depth, different sorts of tricks and maybe some advanced applications in ImageFX, it's well worth the watch. Volume 3 of Catalyzer, towards the end of that video, has a section covering PanCanvas. So look for Volume 3 of Catalyzer on AmigaVideo.net. So it's a great site, preserving a lot of older videos that are no longer available. The Catalyzer VHS tapes came with some discs that had supplemental information on it. The floppies will be difficult to find. The product's no longer available for purchase. But if you go to legacymakerinc.com/downloads, the download directory is still active. You can find some of the disk material archived there. Looks like they have material for tape 1 and tape 3. Maybe there wasn't anything for tape 2, or it's just not on this website. There is a PanCanvas 2 demo there available for download, along with PanCanvas 2 documentation. There's a patch that you need for ImageFX 4 if you're installing the PanCanvas plugin. I haven't looked at these archived files. One of the Catalyzer discs had, I believe, a version of PanCanvas 1.0 on it. That can let you do some of the basic things. I think splines were new to 2.0, so it's just a little less feature-rich than the 2.0 version. When PanCanvas is complete. It gives you a little bit of a report. It gives you an approximate render time. I'm running a 68060 at 50 megahertz. I have not yet installed some of the speed up patches. I could exchange my math libraries. I could run CyberPatcher or OxyPatcher. These are all things to further optimize the system for the 68060 processor. My PanCanvas project is done. I've quit ImageFX and I'm now in MovieShop. Before I begin the import, I wanted to show a few other settings that I didn't go over in the previous videos. If I go to the Settings menu, then select Import Export, that window opens up with some options that affect how your images are processed, how they're exported, and audio exporting. Let's take a look at how your image import settings affect pictures that you bring into MovieShop projects. I'm going to leave the image format set to frames, and I'm going to start off with the sizing options both set to scale and scale. I prepped a few different image sizes in ImageFX prior to this. I got all of these images from PixaBay. You can get some royalty-free images from that website if you want to check it out. Make sure I select my empty scene, import. I put these in temp under King Tut. I have a bunch of different things in here. And let's load this gold mask. This one is 1280 by 960. And MovieShop is scaling it. This is a scale to fit. There you go. It's dividing this up into two individual fields. So it processes the image file twice. And MovieShop's doing an autosave. There we go. Let's do another new scene. I'm going to use the same settings, but this time I'm going to bring in an image that is 360 by 480. We'll see what happens. And here we have the King Tut image stretched out horizontally. If I want to maintain the aspect ratio for that image, let's do another one. Go back to Settings menu, Import Export. Let's just change the width to center. So won't do any scaling on this in the horizontal direction, just in the vertical direction. if needed. That was much faster because it didn't really need to do any calculations. So this is with the image set to scale and scale. This one is set to scale vertically and no scaling horizontally. What else do we have in the image sizing options? There's repeat. Let's do a repeat and see what happens. Import, and let's grab the smallest one. I made a few different sizes of each of these images. So this is the same tut image, and it is 80 by 120. And here it's creating a tiled effect. You can mix the settings up. I'm using a repeat for horizontal and a scale for the height. We'll bring in the same image. So it stretched out my small image vertically and tiled it horizontally. Let's swap those. Now we really stretched that out horizontally and tiled it vertically. I'm going to use a center and a center option this time. If the image is larger, the same size or smaller, it's just going to center that image vertically and horizontally. This one is 640 by 960. So here we've taken the center section out of a very tall image. It's also centered horizontally, but the horizontal resolution fills up the frame. This is the same image, but it's 320 by 480. If I just want to show more of the face, instead of having the top of the head cropped off like in the first one we did, let's do a new scene. Let's go back into settings. Let's keep center on the horizontal. Instead of centering the height, we're going to select Cut Fill. What Cut Fill is going to do is place the image in the top left corner of the screen and anything else is going to be cut off if it's larger than 640 by 480, or it's going to be filled with black. So if you have a smaller image, it will place the image in the upper left corner and fill the rest of the screen with black. If we import our 640 by 960 this way, it crops off the top part of the image. Rather than doing it from the center. Let me import a smaller version of that same image. Let's do a 320 by 480. This one should be shifted over to the left, and everything to the right of the frame is filled in with black. Maybe I want to add a text description on the right side of this frame. I can do that by importing the image that way. If I bring in a smaller image of the same thing, 160 by 240, see what happens. What are my settings? Okay, I had it set on repeat. That's why we see 3 of those. And then we have some of the rest filled in with black. If we do cut fill, and import that same thing, we just get a small picture in the upper left corner. So your options to handle sizes are scale, center, repeat, cut, fill. Scale will take whatever size it is and shrink it or stretch it to fill the frame in the horizontal and vertical directions if you have both of those set to scale. Center will not do anything to the original image resolution. It will simply center the image within the 640 by 480 frame. If it's larger, it will crop the outsides of the image off. If it's smaller, it will just be surrounded by black. Repeat will tile the image. And cut fill will place the image in the upper left corner for starters, and then either cut stuff off if it's too big, or if it's smaller than the resolution, it will fill the frame with black. This image that's coming in now is a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And it's going to be squashed looking. So if you wanted to do something letterboxed, I'd suggest setting up your image resolutions at 640 by maybe 360 or 320, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then when you import, you leave your horizontal resolution alone, and you set the vertical to center. So you can have both options set, center and center, and it will center your 640 by 360 image, resulting in a letterbox look. So it's doing both fields of this image. Maybe something more like a sphere would be a better demonstration for seeing how that's actually squashed horizontally. Here's a 640 by 360. If I bring this in with scale, it's going to be stretched vertically. But if I want to maintain that letterboxing look, I need to go back into my settings. As soon as this is done, settings, import export. Change this to center and center, then click use. Do a new frame. And my fingers are hitting the wrong keys. There we go. Import. There's my 640 by 360. Remember, we're center, center. And here we have a letterboxed version. You have a horizontal black bar across the top and bottom, filling in the extra vertical resolution. And that about covers it. You can go through and experiment with the different settings for import, export. I recommend pre-sizing a lot of your images to save time. So if you're processing them on a modern, faster computer, you want to go for 640 by 480, or you can do the letterboxing if you have something that's in 4K or HD. You can shrink it down to 640 by 360 and then just import those frames. It will go much quicker that way. Don't make your Amiga and MovieShop do any more processing than necessary. Under the image format, you have frames. Some of the text is cut off in this field, but it says Fred list fields. If you're using Art Department Professional, you may be familiar with Fred lists. You can do Fred list frames. If you select fields in the image format, MovieShop is going to expect 2 files for every frame. It's looking for individually saved fields. So instead of 640 by 480, you're going to have something that is 640 by 240 odd and even fields. And it's going to use the multi-pick library to do some translation on a few different image formats that are supported by MovieShop. You could use the multi-pick setting. You also have an option for JPEG directly. This is the fastest way to import files, images into MovieShop. But there's a caveat. The files must meet the exact resolution and JPEG quality settings that are defined for your project. Not everybody is following the exact JPEG specifications, so not all JPEGs will work. even if you think that you have it set correctly. Different images don't adhere to the JPEG standards. If you're interested in JPEG and compression, the authors of MovieShop have compiled a literature list, and I'm putting that up on the screen for you. Some of these texts are in German. I don't know if there's an English translation for some of these. I haven't looked at all of them, but if you're interested, you can check these out. There are probably equivalents of these published by other authors. These are just the recommended books that appear in one of the old MovieShop manuals. They're relevant to the period when MovieShop was being developed. I'm going to switch this back to frames. I'm going to leave this on scale and scale, then click Use. Another one of the settings sections I want to show briefly before I start importing my PanCanvas project is the advanced settings. In newer versions of MovieShop, you can't access this directly through the menu system. You have to hit right Amiga key and E, and then type in Open Window, one word, ADVOPTS. And it opens the Advanced Options window. In this window you have several tabs. You can adjust the video settings. This is video settings for recording. Buffer settings. This affects audio, video, recording, and playback. And some priority settings. This was hidden because really you shouldn't be messing around too much in here. You can screw up your system. If you do, click on the default button to restore the factory settings. In previous videos, there was a delay when I hit play and then the video actually started playing because it was filling up my preload buffer. That setting is down here in the middle tab, the buffer tab. You can adjust the slider. Your maximum is 64 megabytes, no matter how much memory you have on the system. I have over 400 megabytes. Smaller buffer settings will result in a faster response time. But if your media drives have any sort of variable speed, sometimes this buffer will help prevent stopped playback or stopped recording. So if the drive is slow, it'll start to play out what was in the buffer. If you're recording and the drive is slow writing, it will fill up that buffer to prevent the recording from stopping. And then as the drive is catching up, it will read from the buffer. A large buffer results in slower response times. Smaller buffer, faster response times, but maybe you run into some drive speed issues. There's a similar buffer setting for the audio. I typically leave that at 2 megabytes. That's the maximum for the audio buffer. You have record burst size and play burst sizes. These are the sort of chunks that get written to your drive. You can experiment with those to see what works best. I'll go over some of these settings in each of the tabs in more detail in a later video. Just going to click on Use. When doing an import, you should go over to the Edit window under Scenes and click New, creating a new container for the imported files to go into or for the new recording to go into. So this is a new scene file, scene container. If I had left this clicked on my Dragons and T-Rex group and then did the import with that selected, all the imported frames would be appended to the end of this selection, whatever it was. That's not what I want in this case. Sometimes it is. if I'm importing something that's really large and I want to do it piecemeal. Import 100 frames, go away, come back later in the day, import the next 100 frames. It'll just append to the end. It's pretty convenient. So with my new scene selected, looks like I changed something in the defaults that I'll need to revise. It says raw scene. Don't worry about that. This is just a new scene. Go up to import frames. I moved the PanCanvas frames over from the RAM disk to my temp partition. I actually set up two different PanCanvas options, one longer than the other. When you click on it, you can see all the frames are in a numerical sequence with a 4-digit appendage. The import window is asking me to click on the start frame. I can click on that and then hit OK. And if MovieShop sees a numerical sequence that it recognizes, it will then ask me to select the end frame. For either the selection of the start or the end frame, you can click on the frame, then hit OK, or you can simply double click on the frame. So I have 190 frames in here. Let me just do a half and half import so you could see what it was I was talking about before by doing a partial import. So I'm selecting my end frame as frame 99. Hitting OK. And now it's importing one frame at a time. In the Import Frames window, you can see MovieShop importing frames. It appears to be doing something twice for each frame, and it is. MovieShop's looking at the individual frame file and then splitting it into two odd and even fields. As the frames are importing, you can also watch the progress on your output display monitor. It's just stepping through, frame at a time. I don't know if you'll be able to discern this on the video, but at each step you'll see a subtle change as it's processing one field at a time, one field to the next field. I didn't time this, but MovieShop is making some pretty quick progress on the import. We're already up to frame 96, just a few frames to go. 98, 99. A brief pause right here on this last frame. And sometimes you'll see that happen and you might think the system has frozen up for a bit. What was occurring, MovieShop was doing an autosave at the end of that import. So I have my new scene. I can scrub through it in my scene control window, back and forth. Just scrubbing through what I imported in about 3 seconds. I can step through it, either using the scene control window, clicking on either side of my position bar. I can also use the keyboard arrows left and right to step through one frame at a time. If I hold the Shift key down, it's stepping through 10 frames at a time when I'm holding the Shift and the left and right arrow keys. What I want to do is import the second half, and wherever this slider is very important. If I leave it in the middle at 1 second 19 frames and then do my import, that's where MovieShop is going to start inserting files. Maybe that's something you want. That's not what I want to do here though. I want to go all the way to the end before doing the import. Then I'll go back up to the Edit, Import Frames. My first batch only went up to frame 99, so when I select my start frame, I want 100. And this time I'm going to double click on it rather than click 100 followed by OK. MovieShop recognizes that this is an image sequence. It's asking me to select an end frame, and I scroll down and I will double click on the last frame in this folder. Again, as MovieShop is doing the import, you can watch the progress on the import frames window. You can also see on your display monitor the frame-by-frame progression set. It would be a lot faster if I just set up a camera and did a dolly shot across my sign. But I wanted to show different ways of using MovieShop. That's the last frame. MovieShop is now doing its autosave. Autosave is complete. As I scrub forward on the second half, you can see that it was appended to my scene. I'm just going to hit play now to see what it looks like in real time. I made a smaller preload buffer. The response time is quicker than it was previously. I could shrink the preload buffer to make it even more responsive. I could have done this faster just by shooting it with a camera and then importing it, digitizing the footage in real time. After showing examples of importing animation footage from Digital Juice on the Macintosh, bringing it over to the Amiga and into MovieShop, I wanted to do another import example of something that I rendered on the Amiga, this time using ImageFX Studio and PanCanvas 2 to add life to what would otherwise be just a still image. In other applications like Final Cut Pro, this would be a Ken's burn type effect applied to a still image. I'm just panning across it in this example, but PanCanvas will let you do other spline type motions. And it does a really nice job. With my PanCanvas projects imported, the short and the longer version, plus a still frame of the overall image, I'm going to then create a group by dragging these over from the scene list into my clipboard. Inside the clipboard, I will click Make Group. With my new group created, I could click on it and drag it into the scene list, or I can go to the Edit menu, down to Clipboard, and select Clipboard to Scene List. Sometimes I prefer to do that, and it puts it at the bottom of my scene list. There it is. It uses the name of the first clip that was in my group. I could change that name. It doesn't need to match up. I'm just going to add PanCanvas 2 in the comments. Double clicking will go into the group and show me the contents of the group. If I wanted to break this up again, I could drag the group back to the clipboard, select Ungroup, and then bring the items back over into the scene list. One more thing before I wrap up this video. Note in my group with the still frame, there's only one frame when you import a still image. And maybe that's not so useful once I get into editing. There are a couple ways I can lengthen this. Let me show you the cumbersome way. With the still frame selected, I can go over to the edit window and I can mark and copy a block. Then I can paste that block as many times as I like, increasing the length of my scene. So I just added 9 frames, making the overall clip 10 frames, which is 1/3 of a second when it comes to playback. That's super short. Rather than just pasting 1 frame at a time, once I get a certain number of frames in there, I can redo this mark block action. So I click mark block, and then I take my slider in the scene control window, move it over to the last frame, click copy. Now I have a cluster of frames, and each time I hit paste, it's adding 10 new frames. So pasting twice gives me now 30 frames, which is a full second. I can do that same procedure again. Mark block, that indicates the start. Sort of an endpoint. You can consider it setting an endpoint. Then when I click on cut, wherever my slider is, wherever I shuttled over to, that's my out point. So if I select the whole 30 seconds, I put the slider over to the right, click cut. Actually, not click cut, but that works too. Copy would just duplicate it without removing it from the scene. I just cut it, taking the whole thing out. If I paste it back in, it just restores it to the way it was. So you can make mistakes and then sort of undo or correct mistakes this way. That will happen. But now that I'm back to where I started with the 1 second, if I paste it again, it's 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so on. This could take quite some time, and there is an easier way to do this. I'm just going to start over. I'm going to mark a block and cut it out. Cut it. So I'm back to my original single frame still image that was imported. MovieShop has a feature where you can add macros to your system to expand its feature set. And I've already done this a little bit. I looked online, I found an old AREX script that essentially created a still frame from a single frame within a video clip within a scene. And I modified that to do sort of what I just was doing, successively building, lengthening my still frame. And then I added it to the macro list. You can assign keyboard shortcuts to the macros you create to further speed up your workflow. For my still frame lengthening macro, I assigned it to the F1 function key. it's going through a procedure which adds a frame, then adds some more frames, and then adds more frames, and I end up with a clip that is now over 10 seconds long in a much faster time than it would take me to do this by hand. And that's one quick, easy way to lengthen the frames using a macro. The one that I modified was created originally by Bjorn Schwartz. I changed a few things so that it's just going to append the new frames to my existing scene. So this is kind of what the AREX script looks like. It starts off with a block copy operation, and then rather than creating a new scene, I just mark this section out. So it's not creating a new scene for me. It goes right into the do loop. And each time it copies a new chunk of frames and then adds it, essentially doubling the length of your scene each time it goes through this operation. And then it's done. If I want to shorten or lengthen the clip, all I need to do is adjust the do loop. Instead of 1 to 9, I could have 1 to 5, 1 to 35. And this just saves a lot of time. So you can add features to MovieShop. There's a pretty robust list of AREX commands for MovieShop. You can have a lot of control over the application, and you can even set it up with other Amiga programs with your Rex scripts. Have them talk to and process files on the fly. It can get quite complicated, but you could set up MovieShop to feed frames over to ImageFX, have ImageFX do some special processing, bring them back into MovieShop. It adds a lot of power to the base MovieShop editing application. Even though this program is from the mid-90s, I can still add new features and functionality to it. That'll be it for this video. Thank you for watching, staying till the end. Please click like and subscribe. A jeśli podoba się ten video, koniecznie daj mi łapkę w górę i zasubskrybuj mój kanał. Do zobaczenia. Pa, pa.